Hi, scared to heal? You're not weak. Our modern society has made so many things so different. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to heal from a mental condition that maybe was from birth, or an emotional condition that's been caused by trauma or anything that's come along, or a physical condition that you have no control over. Could be an accident, or it could have also been something that showed up later in life. What's important is you're afraid to heal. In other words, you got to tell somebody that you need to heal, and that might go into your record, and that might cause you not to get a job. And oh man, there are just so many. I remember when HIV was first found, there were so many of my friends who were either gay or well, mostly their friends were gay or some other combination where they had been exposed to HIV, and they were terrified to talk to anybody about it because they knew it would affect their work. And what about something like any kind of a venereal disease? People are always afraid. And anything to do with mental or emotional, oh my goodness, you're so worried about what's going to happen with your job. And then you start to think about the other things. Well, what about the time it takes to heal? I've got to go to somebody, either to a hospital or a clinic or a therapist or a physical therapist, a mental health therapist, or whatever. And what about the money? Good grief. There's so much money. I can't even believe what it could possibly cost. I really can't, to go to a mental health therapist in the United States. So it just got to be incredible. I mean, I don't have anything to compare it to because here in Ecuador, I don't have anybody who speaks English, so you don't go to a therapist unless they speak your language. So here we go. Let's talk about the fact that you're not weak and the fact that there are solutions. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to expose yourself. You don't have to be put in a position where your job is threatened, or your level of embarrassment is threatened, or you feel like you've lost control of something. I mean, there's enough things going on in the world right now where there's a loss of power and control without having another. So let's talk about some solutions. My thing is affordability and sustainability. I want you to be able to continue on in life the way you have. And the broad sense for sustainability is, are you in a position to reproduce? In other words, that's the way we think about us as animals. Are you in the position where you have a shelter, food, water, and air? If you have that, you can reproduce. Not that you want to reproduce, it's just that's how you can define sustainability easily. Affordability means that you can go with some of the older ways of looking at how much you should spend for things. When I was young, your rent was never more than 30% of your income, your disposable income. That means your income after all your taxes have been paid. I know I ran into a friend yesterday who was getting ready to do her taxes and realized the company had never taken her taxes out. Well, that's a bad situation, because that means she was getting her net income, it's her entire salary instead of her disposable income. Disposable means that your taxes are paid and that you're sitting there. But it doesn't count gas coming to and from work and things like that. But that's part of what you need to dispose of, is to pay cash for your gas. I know it's very confusing. I happen to love numbers, but it's hard for anybody else to figure out what in the hell people are talking about. Anyway, the point is, there are solutions. There are not a lot of them, but there are solutions. I like very much working with people in a group regarding trauma. Now, trauma is kind of a difficult thing to explain. It's sort of like asking people what they think is beautiful. It's really personal. Trauma could be that you're 70 years old and you're retired, and the paper is telling you, well, how your stocks are doing, or your paper is telling you who died this week of your friends, or the paper is telling you the news that you're anxious to have, and the paper doesn't show up at your front porch. For that person, that's trauma. For somebody who left an hour ago for work and could care less, it's not trauma. But it doesn't seem like a trauma, but it could be. If he didn't have the computer to look up his stocks, it would be trauma. Now, trauma can be way at the other end. It can be your best friend just died in a car wreck, or your mother's on her life support, or one of your friends just went into a coma. I mean, there's so many, or you just were in an accident and have gone into a coma and your family's traumatized. There's so many things that cause trauma. And trauma needs to be addressed. Honestly, it needs to be addressed, because when you try to suppress trauma by ignoring it, all you really do is find a substitute for your trauma pain. I see it all the time. I've seen it my entire life. I've had friends take their own lives. I had a very close friend who took her life because her husband left her. I've had a trauma of living with my mother, who became a raving alcoholic because she married specifically to have sons, and she had me. And then she discovered that when she had her boy, he only made it for 4 days because their blood wasn't compatible. She couldn't have any more without having the same situation. And every time she had a legal abortion, she was that much worse with relieving her pain with alcohol. And so that's what happens. And it happens to a lot of us. And it's not really anything, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. I mean, you're human. We feel pain when we are traumatized, period. And we want something to relieve it. Now, it's not always alcohol. Sometimes it's illegal drugs. Sometimes it's legal drugs, overtaking them. You get 2 different doctors or 4 different doctors or whatever you want to do, and you get hooked. It can also be overeating. It can also be gambling. There's just so many different ways. Overworking. Walking out on your family and thinking that if you start something new, it'll feel fine. And usually those kinds of methods don't work because you haven't healed the trauma. It's not that you're weak, it's that you haven't healed the trauma, and the pain is still there. You haven't come to grips with it, okay? I'm going to use my personal example because it's a lot fairer than using somebody else's, unless I could think of one right away. My personal example is I was raped when I was 15. I knew the person, but I knew nothing about sex. Absolutely not at all. I was just about a week older over my birthday, and there was no internet at the time, and I'd never had access to a library. So I had no background. I really had no understanding of how you created a child. That just was not in my psyche. Even though I was raised on a farm, I knew what animals did, but I didn't know people did the same thing. I had no idea. I was an only child. I didn't live around an aunt, uncle, grandparent, a cousin, anybody like that. I was always a military kid, never knew people very well, never had anybody to ask. Mother sure wouldn't tell me anything. My dad was usually gone, and he sure wasn't going to talk about it, because my mother was a nurse. She should have been able to tell me, but she didn't. So, here you go. So for years and years, well, for my entire adult life, I have said my dreams were shattered. I've tried many ways to overcome that, to do different things, because not only did I have the message of that, I had the message from my mother that girls aren't worthwhile. So I tried over and over to do things that proved that girls can do what boys can do, whatever it was. Fly an airplane, water ski, swim 10 miles, whatever it was. Boy, Jackie was jumping in there to try it because I wanted to prove her wrong. But that didn't that may have healed her comments by showing that she wasn't right, but it didn't heal the fact that I had been assaulted. I'd been impregnated. I had to go through the shame and horror it was horrible because my parents didn't believe me. Fortunately, in the nunnery, Sister Superior and the priest and the other nuns and the other girls, they all said, this kid doesn't have any idea what's going on. And even the nurse in the delivery room believed me and explained to me what was happening to me at the time I was giving birth. Crazy, I know, but that's the way life was 70 years ago. It's just the way it was. I lived on a farm, but I wasn't taught anything that made any sense to me. So, how did I get past this? Well, for the longest time, I blamed him. And then a few years ago, I decided to look up testosterone levels to try to better understand young men. I read a book called The Male Brain. I did a lot of things to try to understand why an 18-year-old boy whose father was in the army, who lived in military housing, would do something like that to me when I was 15 and completely ignorant. And the result I got, and also we have to add in the fact that when he did marry, he married a woman with several children because he loved kids. He wanted to be a dad. Oh, go figure. And he wanted to marry me. Oh, God, yes. He was all into that. He was completely, didn't deny anything and wanted to marry me. So it became more and more complicated and easier to understand as I got old. It wasn't that I didn't want to heal. I did, but I didn't understand how, and I was too young to come up with any solutions. But when I finally figured out what was going on with an 18 to 24 years old, it's not really a lot of, they're not really thinking with their head. This was what I got from most of the psychology that I read. So I have to step back and say, oh, I mean, he wanted a child. He wanted me to marry him. There you go. Okay, so it's a lot easier for me now to go, yeah, he screwed up my dreams, tore apart my fantasy about how my parents really felt about me. I knew it wasn't good, but I didn't know how bad it was. So when you're faced with something like that, I happened to be a part of an organization called LifeRing, L-I-F-E-R-A-N-G, and I'm sure there's other things out there. There should be. I mean, I know people say from time to time, oh, I just found this, but anyway, that's the name of the group, lifering.org. And I run 2 trauma meetings a week. And there are also, I believe, 3 more trauma meetings a week. I believe there's one run by a former psychologist, a retired psychologist. And there's one run by an active psychologist. I co-host with him. And there's one by another person whose background I really don't know. But the idea is you can heal without having to put yourself in the position, which a lot of people are uncomfortable about, not just paying for a therapist, not just attending a therapist, because most people that go do have a regular therapist they see once a week or once a month or once every 2 weeks or something. But a lot of people, especially people who've never been to a therapist, they don't want to sit in front of somebody and say, well, this happened to me. They're embarrassed. They're sad. They're confused. They don't have the answers they're looking for. They're uncomfortable. And they're concerned about the money, they're concerned about the time away from work, they're concerned about the gas money to get to the person besides paying for them. There's all kinds of things. Doesn't mean you're weak, just means you may be embarrassed, you may be scared, you may be uncomfortable, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. Maybe I've got too many other anxieties going on. Maybe I've got a sick child. You just don't want to take the time and the energy. It doesn't matter. What matters is that there are programs. Unlike this particular program, you don't have to say something like, I'm an alcoholic, or I'm a drug addict, or you don't have to say that. No. And you don't have to, it's non-secular, so you don't have to be of a faith that would coincide with how some programs like AA and some other, I know there's a program called SMART, and there is a list of other non-seculars, so if that's an issue, you don't have to do that. You don't have to say anything about what your trauma was. You don't. All you have to say is, hi, I'm here. My name is Periwinkle. You don't even have to show your face if you don't want to. Most of the meetings, not all the meetings, but most of the meetings you can leave your camera off. You can call yourself Periwinkle if you want to, or something else. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to say where you're from. And maybe all you say is, I've got a window that's jammed and my daughter is in that room and she's hot. Any ideas? Why? Why would you say that? Why would you say that if you came to a trauma meeting? Because you want to break the ice? You want to get to know who the people are? You want to be assured that it's confidential? You want to feel safe? You don't want to feel like you're put on the spot. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. You don't have to ask how to fix the stuck window. But if you do, if you talk about the stuck window, then maybe the next time you come, you'll talk about your loneliness, how you feel lonely. And then someone might say, well, you don't have anybody else you can talk to? No, I really feel alone about how uncomfortable I feel. Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you're here because you get to be a part of this group. Maybe the third time you come, you say, I feel like I'm stuck in a closet with a problem I don't have a solution for. And then you've opened up a little bit. Then people are willing to say, well, Periwinkle, would you like to talk to us today? And then if you say yes, then maybe that's the breakthrough. Maybe that's the day that you really say, I had this happen to me, and I haven't talked to a therapist, and I'm feeling really uncomfortable about trying to find a way to feel better about the steps I took after this happened to me, and the way I feel now, and what I feel like I need to do. I'm lost. I just really don't know. Well, if you give us a little bit of information here, maybe there's somebody else who understands. Well, yeah, I was in a car wreck and my daughter died. And I just can't get over the fact that why did I live and she died? And then pretty soon, George decides to speak up. George uses his real name. Well, at least he uses a real name that men have. And George sounds like a man, so here we go. And George's got his camera off too. No, maybe George has his camera on because he's comfortable. George has his camera on. And George says, mine was a son. It wasn't a car. We were in the tractor. And he was fooling around on the back of the tractor. And he fell. And I couldn't stop it fast enough. And I lost him. So I know you're feeling. You feel hollow. There's a huge part of your heart that's been taken out. You feel responsible. You feel like you should have been able to do something. Your guilt is just driving you into the ground. And then George has a bunch of suggestions of the different kinds of ways he's dealt with it. What I call your virtual toolbox. In other words, we visualize having a toolbox and we put things in it. For me, it's crocheting. I put the crocheting in the toolbox. And it gives me something to do that eases my anxiety, whether I'm feeling anxious about any trauma I've experienced in my life, any activities or behaviors I've done that I'm ashamed of. any goals that I might be looking forward to, but I'm nervous about. Maybe I'm anxious about the news. Whatever it is, I pick up my crocheting. Okay, so now George has some ideas for Periwinkle, and George tells him. And because George mentions those ideas, Lisa speaks up and she says, well, you know, I had the same kind of situation. It wasn't me directly, but it was my sister, and yes, it was a car wreck. But these are the different things that she tried, that she's told me about. And this worked that way, and that worked this way, and she found this one didn't work very well at all, but it worked for other people, so I'm going to go ahead and mention it because she did mention it to me. And pretty soon, Periwinkle goes away from the group feeling a level of empowerment, of strength, of confidence. He wasn't weak when he came in, but he was concerned about a lot of things, about interfering with his job, interfering with his bank account, interfering with his time, interfering with his face, being embarrassed, whatever it was. In order to heal mental illness, emotional traumas, or physical, you got to give it time. Nothing happens overnight. I mean, when you're a little kid and you scratch your leg and mommy puts a kiss and a bandage on it, yeah, it might look pretty good overnight, but not as an adult. All that crap that comes into our life takes a while to get out. It really does. And you got to face that. It's going to take time. And yes, it takes time to go to the group. But if it doesn't cost money, it doesn't cost gas, it doesn't cost history in your employee file, it doesn't interfere with your budget, maybe you should try it. You just have to turn your computer on at home when there's a meeting. A lot of meetings. Generally there's 100 meetings a week, depending on what it is you're looking for. But because most are drug and alcohol. But in a lot of cases, even going to one of them, you don't have to say I'm an alcoholic, you don't have to speak at all. But if you just listen to other people who have experienced unfortunate behaviors, responses, traumatic events, whatever it is, and you recognize that they're all there together because they want to get past whatever it was, whatever it happened to be. They want to get past it. And they found that community makes all the difference in the world. Because so many times in our life, no matter what is going on, we feel lonely. Even in a crowd, we feel lonely because somebody doesn't understand what exactly we're dealing with, or what close to that we're dealing with, or what's sort of like what we're dealing with. And so many times, you're not in a position to be around somebody who's going to be empathic. They may be narcissists. They may be stepping on you to make their ego feel better. They could be sabotagers. Maybe they know where you work and they want your job. There just are issues that can come up that would be negative impression on what you're trying to do. They would interfere with your success. And you don't want that. You just don't want that. So, think about it. When you're trying to heal, and you know you need to, and you know you'd like to, there are options. You just have to look around. The one I mentioned is called LifeRing, LifeRing.org. It's a nonprofit. Speaking of nonprofits, my goal in life is to remind people that we couldn't breathe, we couldn't stay alive with water, and we couldn't have shelter if we didn't have an earth. And our earth needs to be taken care of. So I've made things that remind us to take care of the earth. It's in an art expression, but they're really for reminding you. I make small pins, and I make little crochet and embroidered and quilted items for hang on the wall. And it's not about getting something that's going to appreciate in time. It's about having something as a reminder. And it's not about massive consumerism because you're buying it as a reminder to take care of our earth. And you're also helping two artists over 75 who've spent 34 years doing things in a nonprofit. And there's all information about what kind of things we've done. So if you go down in the description and ask any questions about this video, and or take a minute to look at our nonprofit, we'd sure appreciate it. Because that's why we're, well, especially me, why I'm pushed to be on this channel. To remind you to take care of the earth, and to remind you to take care of yourself, and to remind you that you're a part of the earth, not the captain of the earth, not the king of the earth. You're a part of the earth. And that is that. As I love the earth, I love you, and that's why I'm doing this. Thank you.